In this lecture, I'm going to show you how to add a node to the beginning of a doubly linked list. Here we're going to call this method unshift. Unshift will take in a value as an argument. So starting off this method, we're going to start by creating a new node. And pass in that value from the argument. This creates us a new node. Alright, so just starting off this method just like this, it says though currently this is our list right now based off this. And again, the unshift method, the purpose of it is to add a new node to the very beginning, so right before the 2. So with this right here, it creates us a new node. So let's say that we did list.unshift and we wanted to add, say, 50 to this list here. Well, currently, let's just say that this 50 is just floating around over here on its own, and we have the list that's separate from it. So, and we want this 50 to, we want the 2 to connect to 50, and we want the 50 to connect back to 2. That is the idea. So this simply right here creates this floating 50 on its own. All right, so next step is we're going to check if the length is 0. So if this dot length is 0, then that means that, well, it's like as if this didn't exist, then we can just pretty much just as a standalone on its own, it'll be considered the head and the tail, right? So this dot head equals 0 or equals the new node, and the tail is also the new node. And increment the length by 1, and we're just going to return this. Alright, next is we want to point the current head's previous property to the new node. Alright, so again, this is the current list, and we want this, which is a 2. 2 right now is the head, so we want 2 to point to 50. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to do this dot head dot prev. So by adding dot prev, it's like we use the arrow to the left of it and point it to something, and that thing we want to point it to is the new node. So now at this point, this statement here is having the arrow point from 2 over to 50. All right, next is we want to point the new node's next property to the current head. So we want now to point 50, which is the new node, and point it to the head, or yeah, how do we refer to it? Yeah, the current head. All right, so now we want the 50 to point back to 2. So the way we're going to do that is new node dot next and point it to this dot head. All right, so this dot next essentially creates that pointer to the right hand side, and we need to point it to something, and that is where we're pointing it to this dot head, which is this here. So now we got a pointer from the 2 to the 50 and the 50 to the 2. So at this point, it's as though we created this right here. However, there's one thing missing. As of now, this 2 is still considered the head. So the last step is to assign the 50 to, or the new node in this case, to be the new head. So here we're going to say this dot head is the new node. All right, so now the head shifted is now the 50 here. All right, so now everything's functional and we just have to increment to. So we're going to do this dot length plus plus and return this. And there you go. So let's see if we can recreate this, right? Well, I already set up this method here, the unshift with the 50, right? So let's go ahead and run this code. Let me expand the console. Run the code. As you see, we get a length of 4. So that's good, right? That's a total 4 nodes that we're pushing in. And let's go ahead and expand this, and we see that the head here is showing that it's the node with 50, which is here. That's good. And the tail is the node with 24, which is here, so it's the last one. That's good. Let's go ahead and expand the head. If we expand the head and looked at the next node to it, the next node, it's 2. So 2 is to the right 50. If we expand that and see what's next to the 2, we see that it's a node of 7, which is here. And if we look to see what's to the right of 7, it is a node with 24 here. Here, right there. And if we expand that, you'll see that the next property is null, and because it is the end. All right, so there you go. So we got a functional unshift method.